Well, good evening, fans, for Isenhour Minute. We're going to have a wonderful time on Isenhour Speaks. Tonight we have a guest speaker. And if you are not familiar with Miss Teresa Roane, you're soon going to be. And if you don't know anything about her, I'm not going to read her bio. I'm just going to tell you about what a good friend she is and how she does amazing things for the movement of the Southern cause. She's a true Southern lady, and she is proud of her heritage, and she has very much knowledge about it. And many of you may have seen her in SEB camps or UDC chapters giving talks. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about things that she discusses regularly. And we're just going to have a good conversation. I want y'all to realize that the purpose of this is for you to learn. See, that's Miss Teresa and I, we have a little problem with this. We're talking to you all, but you're not learning. And we know that because you're not engaging with people. You're always afraid when you meet some kind of sourpuss, like Kevin Levin or Don Koski or somebody like that who says, "Woo, there's no such thing as black Confederates." You go, "Woo, I'm so scared. Oh, Miss Teresa, help. Well, guess what? She's been helping for 6 years. She has a very well regulated Facebook page that puts amazing things out on it. But you're not listening to her because you're not reading it. And if you are, then you would be calling up and saying, help, John Koski's in the area. So anyway, we're going to have a discussion tonight, and we're going to talk about why is it y'all not learning, because you're not to learn tonight. So Miss Teresa, I'm going to leave it over to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenhower. Well, one of the things that has been happening lately, they keep saying that black Confederates are a myth. And we have these historians that are defining what it means to be a soldier. One of the things you need to understand is logistics. So logistics means that you need non-combatants and combatants to run your military. But what I think is so interesting, it is 2020. Mm-hmm. We live in the age of technology. There's information out there. So I don't understand why the statements are being regurgitated from the decades ago when we couldn't get to this information. So for an example, I decided that people should see some of these service records that are actually at the National Archives. Right. And the first one I have is Richard Poplar, who was with Company H, 18th Virginia Cavalry. Notice that it says private on there. Mm-hmm. Now, because he was in the cavalry, that meant he had a sword.
Yes, he did.
He had a gun. And guess what? He was captured at the Battle of Gettysburg.
Oh, Lord, so he was captured up north.
He was captured up north. He ended up at Fort Delaware for 4 months and then 19 months at Point Lookout. So here's your classic example. It says private. He went in as a private, left as a private. Now, he will eventually be exchanged, and he goes back down to Petersburg. And oh, by the way, Barrett, he was a free man of color.
Well, no, women, we have to explain that because most folks don't realize that. Guess what, folks, particularly some of you snowflakes, and they're not men watching, but the Kevin Levins of the world, there were actually black folks living in the South happily as free men. And they were very, 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 how can I say, there were over 60,000, if I understand the census of 1860.
Well, in 1860, there were over 250,000 free people of color living in the South versus 225,000 up north. This is based on the census. This is not me talking. This is the U.S. Census. Okay. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, there's a couple of more slides in here that show men of color that are privates. You've got Benjamin Watson here, who was with the 25th Tennessee Infantry. And then you also have Presley Hines, who died while in service. He died at Chimborazo Hospital here in Richmond, Virginia. He's actually buried over at Oakwood Cemetery. And the interesting thing about his service record, it says he died of laryngitis, which I'm not sure what that means. It's probably just a throat ailment and they didn't know what else to call it, but also he is a free man of color. Now, people keep dismissing non-combatants. And I don't understand that, but let the audience know this. The non-combatants who were people of color made more money than the musket toters.
No.
Yes.
No, wait a minute. Somebody paid them?
Paid them.
I thought they were slaves in some cases.
No. Well, you've got people who were slaves, that were enslaved, but you also have free. So, take for an example, you got Joseph Parkman here, who was with Company A, 8th Battalion Georgia Infantry. He enlisted as a musician with a $50 bounty. So that was a bonus for him to join.
Well, now, unless I'm incorrect, they didn't give a lot of bonuses to join the Confederate Army early on, did they?
Not too many, but it seems like they did that with the musicians. And what's so fascinating about him is that he makes it all the way to Appomattox. And you know what I found out?
What?
He was 52 years old. Now, people, do not discount musicians. This is what you need to know about them. They're the ones that give you the signal out on the battlefield. This is dangerous work. It's not always about entertainment. But the most fascinating service record that I found was a George Washington, and he was a porter for the CSA. Now, he was making $30 a month.
Maybe I thought the average Confederate soldier made $10 or $11 a month.
They made between $11 to $13
Okay.
a month. But this is a colored porter. I'm not sure what that position meant, but he was making $30 a month. And then the Confederate Congress gave him a raise to $40 a month.
You're talking about the Confederate States of America Congress in Richmond voted to give him more money.
More money.
Now, pray tell, why would they do that to anybody, whether it was a white man or a black man? Why would they do that?
He must have been somebody special, and he must have had a special position. I would love to know why he was making that kind of money.
Exactly. So we have a lot of unknown situations where we don't know why they were paid, but we know that they were paid and they were enlisted. Think about that. How can a black fella, whether he's a slave or a free man, in this racist South that y'all keep telling us about, have the Confederate Congress, sit there and actually engage in giving this man more money for his importance to the Confederate Army? Now, let me put it that way. The Confederate Congress dealt with the Confederate Army. So you're dealing with politicians who are giving a man more money because he's essential to the Confederate cause. So to me, it's amazing. It's amazing. That mind blows some people, because it's like, wait a minute. I thought that since you were black, you were not allowed to do things. Things are a lot different down south than you have been told. You've been lied to all your life.
Well, and people need to understand, Teamsters, they are the people which we would know today in the military as your transportation corps. So they handle your supplies. They are making actually decent money too. They're making $20 a month. Chief cooks are making $20 a month. The assistant cooks are making $15. But what's even more fascinating, I have found on quartermaster records, blacksmiths are making $30 a month. So, you know, you may discount, you may dismiss these men who are your non-combatants, but they're actually very important to the military effort.
Let me ask you this. In a unit, when you had a blacksmith attached to a unit, the 31st Virginia or anybody, any unit, that was an integral part of the unit. They were part of the unit and known as part of the unit. In other words, they were respected in that unit, and they worked in that unit. So they had just as much to lose if the unit didn't do well.
Well, not only that, they were skilled, and you need skilled labor, just like you do in your military today. So I don't understand why we have these historians who just discount their position or their job. You know, historians are always talking about the fact that, you know, black Confederates were forced. They were forced. Yes, there were some who were impressed. However, the Confederacy is going to have the Conscription Act in 1862, which is going to draft men of all ethnic groups into the military. And in 1863, the United States is going to do the same thing with their men. So draft means you are forced to go. But what's also very interesting is that what I found out using the official records of the War Rebellion, which is a federal government publication, was that they were also, we're talking about the United States now, we're talking about the military, were forcing men of color to join the USCT. And in fact, it became such a problem that they actually passed General Orders number 5 in February 1865 to end that. So I think we need to be careful when we keep saying that only men of color on the Confederate side were forced. But speaking of the official records of the War Rebellion, do you know that there are actually documentation from the governor, from other military leaders on the United States side that talk about black Confederates? There's documentation of it. And in fact, Governor Yates of Illinois writes a letter to Lincoln talking about it and saying that, if they're doing it on the Confederate side, maybe we need to get the Negroes, in the United States to do the same thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, everybody has access to the official records of the War Rebellion.
Exactly.
You too can take a look at some of this.
Specifically, John Kosky, Kevin Levin, and your other little minions running around telling lies and writing books about it. You're liars. That's what you are. You're liars, because this stuff is out there. It's not rocket scientists. Now, yes, I have to admit, it does take someone with a nice intelligence and an archivist to find this stuff, but it's there, and it has always been there. It wasn't reprinted last week. It's always been there. Southerners have forgotten our history because we have been reconstructed by people like Kevin Levin and John Kosky and Wade Rawls, the people who tried to destroy our history. So we're going to set the records right. Now, what else do we have?
Well, here's the other thing we need to consider. What were some of the positions for the United States colored troops?
Okay.
Well, they too, you can find them at the National Archives. They are there. Take, for example, George Street. George Street was a cook. No, he was a musician.
Okay, musician.
He was a musician, and yet, does anyone say he's a myth? I don't think so. How about Moses West?
Okay.
He was the company cook. Does anyone say he's a myth?
So you're talking about the United States Army doesn't feed its troops, is what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that how come George Street can be a musician and be in the military, but if you're Joseph Parkman on the Confederate side, you are not. You are a myth. You are dismissed as being important.
Oh, may I say the word racist? Is that what you're saying? This is
Well,
a racist statement against these soldiers who fought and bled. They are disrespecting our veterans, as John Kosky and these people are doing. That's what's happening. They're being racist by doing this, I think, because they're saying,
I've said that on Facebook. I mean, what are we doing? We have to understand logistics. We have to understand that. And here, you've got United States colored troops doing the same positions, doing the same jobs.
Yet somehow they're venerated, and then our Confederate soldiers were not.
Exactly. So think about some of the things I've talked about tonight, because the technology is there. You too can find it. People are scanning newspaper articles and finding all kinds of information about these men of color. And actually, there were some women of color who served in the Confederate military. They had positions, and you can find their service records. And we need to just understand that they are part of history. They need to be recognized. And it's not about the lost cause. This is a fact. There are service records. There are paperwork. One other thing I need to mention that a friend of mine found for me, and actually I just posted it recently again to remind people. He found 3 Confederate military discharge papers. One happened to be of a white man, one was of a slave, and one was of a free man. They all served in the Confederate military. They all had the same discharge papers. Now, what does that tell you?
It means they were treated equally in the Confederate Army.
There you go.
There you go to the racist Abraham Lincoln and his Union Army at that time. But you're racist. And anybody who sits there and denies this is beyond racism, because what you're doing is, as opposed to just lying outright, which you are lying outright, because you do know better. Kevin Levin, you know better. John Kosky, you've held these things in your hand, you know better. But you people are consistently trying to do your political stuff to destroy the South. For what reason, I don't know. But your lies are not going to stand, because the truth is the truth. We have the truth on our side. We honor our veterans in the South. Black, white, Native American, Hispanics, Asian, Jewish. And so we're tired of you all telling us that somehow that the Southern people are racist. I'm tired of this stuff. And again, one of the big things that we're doing, we're speaking to a good group of people. We have a broad section of people. A lot of you are Second Amendment people. Probably never heard any of this before. Stay with us. It's part of the Second Amendment movement also. So keep in mind that we have to get the history taught. We're not making up anything. And again, we'll just have to realize that a lot of folks are writing books in history. They're leaving out a large part of what really happened during that war. This war has a lot of records that still people do not know about. In fact, when you were with the former Museum of the Confederacy, you said the archives, you yourself didn't go through all of them because there's too much to go through.
There was just way too much. There are still things that I regret that I did not get a chance to take a look at that talks about Confederates of color. There was so many quartermaster records to go through. And, people just need to understand history is complex because people are complex. It is not black and white history. It's actually very gray.
And on that note, we're just going to say good night to you all, and we'll look forward to your comments. And again, remember, I am one of the administrators of this thing, so any cussing or anything or talking bad about Miss Teresa, you will be cut off. I'm not going to tolerate any bad talk about her. So you just keep your little minions off of this thing. But y'all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.